do you think of when you hear the word addiction? If you're a wrestling fan, you'll probably refer to that phrase as a personal demon of some sorts, but addiction alone is proven to have a vice grip on the entertainment industry. Some of these performers can be our favorite all-time greats. The history of addiction in wrestling is quite complicated because there is not one definite reason for this stigma. That sparks the question of, why is addiction so impactful in the wrestling business? What can we do as fans? And who is to blame for this addiction in wrestling? Many more questions as we tap into coming up on Cultural Influence. Check no 212. Welcome to Cultural Influence Wrestling Edition. I'm the host, Ray, and there's my brother Richie. Make sure you follow us on TikTok at
Richie Too Litty
and Ray the Iconic Status. But anyways, I'm actually excited about this podcast.
Yes, sir.
We've been talking about this for even Seth Rollins said
he's flipping.
Come on, man. Visionary,
excited, bro.
Yeah, because I'm a visionary. And we're visionaries, man, because we've been talking about this for so long. And this is the first of many directional podcasts that
Yes, sir.
I've been meaning to do for the longest. The first of many. And this podcast, we're going to focus on one controversy, that is addiction. And as we've seen in this topic, it affects the wrestlers, it affects the families of these wrestlers, and it even affects us fans as a whole. So, Richie, I'm going to go ahead and start for you. When did addiction become noticeable for you as a fan?
Honestly, I never really could tell as a fan. The first person that I really remember, I feel like having some type of an addiction, I believe might have been Jeff Hardy.
Agree.
Around 2003, man, it's just something about him seemed a little off. And then, when he got released and everything, and his entire his initial beginning of his TNA run, he just seemed, not only that, he was like really skinny. He was smaller, you know what I'm saying? And he just didn't seem like himself, but he was still himself. I didn't notice that's what it was. But that's the first thing I can think of when I think of somebody might have been on drugs in wrestling.
Awesome. That's interesting that you say that, because same thing goes for me. But for me as a fan, it didn't really become noticeable to me because, I got introduced to Jeff Hardy in his second run in WWE.
Right on.
And so when Jeff was there, it was one of those things like, oh my God, this dude is cool. I think I found my new wrestler. And then lo and behold, he's supposed to be in that Money in the Bank match. And out of nowhere, he just gets suspended.
Yeah.
And so, me as a kid, I was probably 8. I was 7 going on 8, actually, because my birthday is around WrestleMania week. But I just remember being a kid just thinking, what just happened and stuff. And then as I got older, I was like, oh, Jeff was battling an addiction.
Yes.
And so, when I think about addiction, I think addiction, just my observation, because obviously I wasn't alive in the 80s, but I feel like there was this look that a lot of guys would aim to have. And so, that's thus starting the steroid trials and all of that type of stuff. You look at Hulk Hogan, he was that ideal man. And so, with wrestling, a lot of things, in the 70s, they were just scratching the surface. Because I feel like wrestling is on that urge to just find what was next. And then at that time, it was the bigger guy generates the bigger reaction and stuff.
For sure.
So, do you think that formula became evident because a lot of performers in the day would aim for that? Do you think that became the ideal formula in the 80s?
Definitely, because the whole point of wrestling back then was to be bigger than life. You know what I'm saying? You had all these guys, and they were bigger than anything you had ever seen in real life. So when you look at them on TV, you're just like, oh, man, this is something I've never seen before. You had guys like Jimmy Snuka, Big John Studd, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, Bruno Sammartino, Jesse the Body Ventura. These were all really large men. So I can only imagine that people trying to work their way up the card didn't feel an immense amount of pressure to get that way, to look that way so they could, ascend.
And since we're talking about evolution, wrestling has came a long way. I mean, if you look at a Raw now versus a Raw back then, I mean, it was an evolution from the stage, and I'm gonna say it's an opposite way with the performers, because you look at guys now, you look at Seth Rollins, you look at Kevin Owens, those guys aren't big. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, most definitely.
And so, and I think that's one of the reasons why maybe addiction isn't so heavy in the wrestling world. And of course, I'm gonna make a basketball connection and stuff here. So, you look at basketball today, right? There's shout outs to Chet Holmgren, number 2 draft pick, Oklahoma City Thunder.
You know
what I'm saying? But you look at him. One of the number one criticisms that a lot of people have been giving him was that he's skinny, he's gonna get bullied in the post. But even in NBA basketball, we're shifting more from the athletic guy who could jump out the gym and lift a freight train. You know what I'm saying? If you're a skilled guy in the league, you can be something. You look at Stephen Curry, you look at Luka Doncic, you know, those guys, I could probably lift more than both of those guys. You know what I'm saying?
I don't know, man.
They
say the same about KD, too.
Exactly. You know what I'm saying? But these guys are just freakishly skilled. Sure. And you look at Seth Rollins, you know, he's just skilled in the ring. I mean, some guys are, you know, the anomalies like LeBron James, skilled and athletic as hell. Yeah. And I mean, even to some extent, you could say a lot of big guys like Keith Lee. These big men can go.
Yeah.
But let's go ahead and trail back. You know, we talked about addiction. We had talked about, you know, all the 80s and stuff like that. And a lot of this, I didn't really get exposed to this till I saw Dark Side of the Ring. And so one thing I love about Dark Side of the Ring is that it does highlight, like, literally pretty much it all. What was one episode that stuck out to you the most out that whole series?
The Von Erich episode.
The Von Erichs, yeah.
The Von Erich episode. I mean, Oklahoma boy, born and bred. So a lot of people that are wrestling fans here, they have a really good history and understanding of the Von Erich family and what they did with World Class Championship Wrestling down in Texas. I know people who hung out and partied with them.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
I talked to a few.
Yeah. They were outside, boy. So people really loved them, and they were one of the biggest stories in wrestling that weren't in, you know, the Jim Crockett promotions or even WWF. You know,
NWA.
Yeah. They were superstars out there, man. And it is like one of the most tragic stories in wrestling, and you can really only attribute it to addiction, man.
Yeah,
you know, we only have one of those brothers still walking amongst us right now.
Exactly, and I mean addiction along with mental health, and we will tap into mental
except for the oldest one. He passed away from like a stomach issue.
Yeah,
clarify that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but one episode that had stuck out to me was the plane ride from hell.
Okay,
I heard so many stories, and I just didn't know what to believe. But one of the things that had stuck out to me was the Scott Hall incident. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? He was on the plane. Then was it him and Mr. Perfect that got fired after that incident?
I believe so.
You know, and so like when you think about when I saw that episode had literally blew my mind. I mean, yeah, it probably exposed a little bit. You know?
Yeah. Oh man, everyone. Every time the episode airs, somebody's getting canceled, bro.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying. And sometimes it's on their own accord because I mean, Tommy Dreamer, he just went ahead and shot himself in the foot with that episode.
Jumped right into the noose.
Yeah. And then there was a few episodes that had shocked me. I remember the Dynamite Kid was a very, you know, revealing episode to me. Like I didn't know how much he was suffering from addiction and how like it ultimately led to the downfall of his life, because we actually had, you know, Dynamite Kid for a minute.
Yeah. He lasted a lot longer than his contemporaries did. Now, his quality of life wasn't anything, you know, people would want to experience, but nonetheless, he outlasted a lot of his peers back then.
Yeah, and since we're talking, another thing that the Dark Side of the Ring did expose me was the actual rock star life that a lot of guys did have. You know, you're being on the road more than most entertainers.
Oh yeah.
And so like when you're on the road, you know what I'm saying, the expectation to do drugs, it's a little more relevant. You know?
Oh yeah. That 80s lifestyle compared to the physique, the women, the showtime, the money. Oh man, it was one hell of a time for those guys.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? And then a lot of the time, wrestlers are on the road more than most entertainers.
Oh yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So when you think about that, you know, and then there's an old saying, like, sometimes the ultimate wrestling gimmick is you turned up to 1,000, and alcohol can get you there.
And some other stuff too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Other entertainers. I mentioned that rock star life. You know, like, what is your, like, how do you deal with, what is your take with other rock stars in that wrestling life? You know, like, I mean, what is the similarities? There we go. What is the similarities with wrestling guys and rock stars that you've seen and dealt with? I mean, like, not dealt with. Like, he was in the tree.
Yeah, right. I am not a wrestler, folks. You know, addiction and entertainment go hand in hand. Some of our greatest musicians and even actors suffer from drug abuse. You know, great legends like Jimi Hendrix, Kurt Cobain, Ray Charles, Eminem, Ozzy Osbourne, John Belushi, River Phoenix, and even Robert Downey Jr. They all had struggles with addiction, and it's almost like the creative mind has a need for some type of stimulant that makes them more susceptible, you know, and the same could be said for wrestling, you know?
Yeah.
Because outside of the physical and medical need for it, there's also the creative aspect of storytelling that encompasses wrestling. Not only outside the ring, but inside the ring. When you think about how people put matches together and how there are a lot of creative minds, not only in between the ropes, but behind the books. So I can only imagine how, somebody could be at a party and be like, oh, I got this wonderful storyline. You know what I'm saying? Because there's some storylines that goes on in wrestling that you're just like, a sober mind might not have thought of that.
Yeah, okay, agree.
You know what I'm saying?
Agree.
And so I just feel like, a lot of these people are very creative, and a lot of them just tend to rely on certain things to influence that creativity. And that could possibly be an accelerant to those
addiction
as well. Yeah, for sure.
Nice. And I mean, one thing that you did point out was a lot of the guys was like, some of their most popular albums or even videos or eras in their career was when they was addicted.
Oh yeah.
And and that's a problem. Like that probably, hopefully doesn't, but a lot of upcoming artists could be influenced to do that.
Oh yeah.
I mean, Lil Wayne had a phase where didn't the Carter 3 come out when he was on lean constantly?
Oh man, Lil Wayne, that whole I don't even know where it started, but Lil Wayne's whole 2000s run was full of that. But we look at guys right now, like guys like Future, Molly Percocets, like this. It's drug fueled. Everything is a big part of entertainment, and whether it be rock stars, whether it be sports entertainers, or whether it just be real sports heads. Real athletes, because there are also athletes that do their share of drugs as well.
Yeah,
and it just influences them to do what they do to the 10th power, I guess.
Nice. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and get back to wrestling, all right? Because that's why we're all here and stuff like that.
Hey, for sure.
Now another factor is I think when you look at another episode on Dark Side of the Ring that did pop out to me was the New Jack episode.
Yeah.
And I think that was a very good episode. It highlighted a lot of stuff about the world of New Jack.
Yeah.
And so like, what do you think as far as like that that style? Do you think that influences it, or do you think it's one of those it makes people numb to the extreme? Because New Jack would go ahead and smoke a crack before he would go out to the ring.
Yeah. I definitely a little bit of both, man, because you're always in pain. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? You're always hurting, and then also you have to be to a certain level to even want to do that. You know what I'm saying? I couldn't just sit here and just be like, all right, y'all, I'm gonna jump off a balcony right now through a table.
In my right mind.
You know what I'm saying? Now, if I did a little line or something like that, I'm like, oh, whoa, let's get it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, that definitely would push somebody to not only do something they wouldn't normally do, but also to cope with the pain in a way that they normally wouldn't cope with it.
Exactly. It gets you into that era of like being like not accepting reality at almost in some points. Because one of the we had already talked about Jeff, but we're going to talk about Jeff, because he's one of the guys that has suffered from addiction. But Jeff was 22, man, when he was literally jumping off of ladders, and I'm 22 right now, and I'm gonna tell you this right now, like if I'm 22. I don't plan on doing this for the long haul. And you look at a dude like Jeff Hardy, who's been doing it for so long, and you're still going to place that higher expectation on him. Your body is going to wear down.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Now, one thing that it stuck out to me was I didn't really realize the treatment of injuries coming into when I watched Young Rock. Uh-huh. And you remember when his dad was going through that, this is literally in the midst of them pretty much struggling now. Rocky Johnson, this was probably, wasn't this the 80s?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, and so like, do you think with that whole incident, with it happening in the 80s, do you think it's just as relevant today to treat your injuries and stuff like that with constant pills and stuff?
Now, no, because now people know there's other ways around it. Mm-hmm. I think that's a really big difference between today's wrestlers and the wrestlers of the past. They've learned from the mistakes of the past, because a lot of these guys didn't choose to get hooked on opioids. They got them from the doctor.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? So a lot of these guys know that it's like, hey, man, I can't just be swallowing a bunch of pills. Like, I saw how that left certain wrestlers in the past. So a lot of these guys are actually just big weed heads.
Agree.
Or they know how to take it in moderation. So, the one thing I can say about the guys of today, they've definitely learned from the mistakes of the past, and they are doing the better with the information that was given with them. So big ups to these guys, man.
And one thing I did want to talk about, because like a lot of things, since we're talking about Young Rock, one of the issues that I saw with Rock's father, like as Rock highlights in most of his, in his biography altogether, is like it's a form of masculine energy.
Yeah.
And I think masculine energy, do you think that plays a role into addiction?
Yeah, because you don't want to be seen as weak.
There you go.
And there's a lot of these guys that were, especially, not even back then, but just in wrestling in general, if you get hurt, you're going to lose your spot, or there's this fear of losing your spot. And also, you might look less than. It's like, oh, this guy's always hurt. This guy's always in pain. But if you're just that guy that can just get up, take an ass whooping, and keep pushing, then you're going to be one tough SOB and more likely in line for that push.
Nice.
You know, so yeah, wrestling is just fueled off of machismo, you know?
Yeah. That's good. And the way I look at it with masculine energy affecting the world of addiction, I get what you're saying on that whole deal, but I feel like, I don't know what guy was it, but then there was like, it was. You remember when Undertaker had that like whole wrestlers court and stuff like that? This is a backstage story, and like I don't know which guy it was, but like one guy did not want to hang out with the big dogs, obviously.
Yeah,
and so that led to him being viewed at differently in the locker room. And one thing that I think was kind of revealing to me was like how X-Pac would get praised for being able to drink and hang out with guys for a numerous amount of time.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Then go and be at Raw the next day and perform like nothing is wrong,
despite being the smallest guy in the room,
Yeah,
I feel like a lot of that negatively impacted him as well because you're looked at as being, they literally called him kid,
Yeah,
and he's walking around here with guys that are 6'4", 6'10", he's easily the smallest guy in the room, but he has to do the most to show that, hey, I can hang, I can kick with you guys and earn these guys respect. So yeah, it's a total like just culture to want to fit in and be seen as equal.
Yeah, and another thing that made it more relevant. Do you remember I think it was last year when Taker had said, guys backstage are back there playing video games, whereas, you look at the APA back in the 90s, like these guys, I feel like that was the embodiment of how it was backstage.
Yeah.
And like if you're, once again, and to come back to what we were talking about with earlier, if you're constantly on the road 300 days out of the year, you don't have no luck but to fall under that addiction wheel, unless you're not strong-headed and stuff like that. Yeah. And which also brings me into why I want to shout out AEW for kind of becoming that, that curse breaker and not making sure that their backstage isn't so toxic, because one thing I did want to shout out to was Eddie Kingston, and he's an integral member of the new generation, and he's challenging wrestlers to go ahead and don't be an alpha male, man. So mental health, do you see the connection with mental health and addiction in the wrestling world?
Very much so. Very much so. You are dealing with people who are on the road 24/7, dealing with nagging injuries, being away from their family, worried about their spots, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And then, like you said, there's just so many things going on, and you have these people who are probably, trying to impress the booker, and then also, wanting to please the fans. They have to be so many different things to so many different people, and it's easy to lose sight of yourself.
Yes.
And so I bet there's a lot of these wrestlers that probably need a regular therapist, somebody that they can speak to just to make sure that they're in a good place so they can be the best version of themselves.
Yeah, and according to mentalhealth.gov, mental health problems can sometimes lead to alcohol or drug abuse, as some people with mental health may misuse these substances in a form of self-medication. And that's according to mentalhealth.gov. And I think with wrestlers, it's no different.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like a lot of these guys, to go back to the ECW days, a lot of there was New Jack who would use it to perform, but a lot of guys would use it as self-medication to bring themselves down.
Yeah.
And, we look at the likes of, we lost Ashley, we had lost Daphne, we had lost Canyon, all of these guys to suicide because their mental health, it wasn't normal for them to step forward. And that's why I said, thankful for this new generation. We are at that stage to where we can sit there and say, you know what? You need to go. It's okay to say that you need help. Shout outs to John Moxley, by the way.
Yeah.
Didn't even know the man was addicted.
Yeah.
I had no clue. But and as we all seen in the past, addiction varies.
Oh yeah.
It's not as serious as some guys, but the man was addicted. And once again, I got so used to seeing Moxley on AEW that like once he was gone, how long was Moxley gone?
Oh man, I can't call it, man. He was out for a good while, but he needed it because there was a time there where he was looking real bloated, man. I saw him on the episode right before he left, and his face was really red and swollen, and I was just like, man, Mox is...
I just thought that was the gimmick,
yeah, you know what I'm saying? Right. I just thought my man was hot.
Yeah. But it became evident.
But he wasn't well.
Yeah, and when he came back, I saw the difference. I didn't realize how serious it was. Yeah. And I think that is one thing that we are going to talk about later with what we can do as fans is also, take note, like pay attention to the stuff instead of being just a wrestling source and trying to just do things for views and critiquing.
You don't have to tweet your every thought at somebody after episode of Raw because
save the heat, save the heat,
save the heat, save the heat, save the heat. These are people, man.
Save the heat. But yeah, that really does play a role into how a wrestler, in a wrestler's addiction role.
Oh yeah,
for
sure.
I didn't realize that the Hardys, they are orphans. You know what I'm saying? Like, they lost their mom when they were young, and not too long ago they had just lost their dad, and this is while they were in the E. So you also got to take into consideration why Jeff is battling with alcohol.
Yeah,
you know.
I can imagine it'd be tough. A lot of these people come from broken homes. A lot of people come from distorted families and things like that. They just and they cling to wrestling to find themselves and find their identities. And when they get into this business, it chews them up.
Exactly.
They take a beating, not only inside of the ring but outside of it.
Oh, of course. And since we're all enough of the negativity, thank God that, like, with addiction, as I've been mentioning, AEW's been stepping up. A lot of people are stepping up to battle addiction.
There are a lot of guys also in WWE that have stepped up to break that mold of, we got to go out and kick it. Guys like Xavier Woods, guys like Kofi Kingston.
Of course.
Mustafa Ali, Kevin Owens. Like, these are people who don't necessarily, indulge in those type of outside activities. And they,
it's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. I guess definitely got to mention CM Punk. He definitely wasn't finna ask a guy to go out and drink the next day.
He wasn't. Yeah. Facts.
So yeah, man, this new generation, they definitely learned, and you gotta respect it.
Yeah, of course. And I think one star of the show that we definitely gotta acknowledge is my man DDP, man.
Oh yeah,
he's one of the he created DDP yoga. A lot of guys, he saved a lot of lives, and he's even added years to a lot of guys. Because, rest in peace to the late, great Scott Hall. But, no telling, we could have probably lost Scott Hall a lot earlier than we did if he wasn't there.
DDP over the last decade or so has been very instrumental in the recovery of wrestling stars through his DDP yoga program, and has even gone as far as opening up his home to help his struggling brothers through recovery. Yeah. His journey of bringing Jake the Snake back from the grips of death is well documented, and they got a documentary. I want to call this the. I know the name is escaping me right now.
But I know what you're talking about, because I remember the video of the DDP, because he was living with DDP's wife and stuff like that. Yeah. And shout outs to DDP's wife as well. You know what I'm saying?
Kimberly, bro.
Yeah, Kimberly. Of course. But it's a lot of it's a lot that goes into the DDP yoga, and he's done a lot for the wrestling world.
Yeah.
I feel
and enough can't be said about the work he put into, like you said, extend the time Scott Hall had with us through his battle with addiction. So yeah, DDP has definitely been a very shining light over the last 10 years in helping wrestlers find themselves, and not only not being addicted, but just taking care of themselves with yoga. When wrestlers are having a hard time or they're injured, instead of turning to pills, they turn to DDP.
Yeah,
because that yoga is going to get that extra pressure off their back.
Yeah, you're right. Because he did it. Shawn Michaels, he's helped Shawn Michaels.
Chris Jericho,
he's helped Edge. Yeah, for a period, Jericho wasn't doing nothing but DDP yoga.
Yeah.
Kudos to that, man. And since we're on the topic of redemption, man, every wrestler has their own redemption story with addiction.
Yeah.
And some guys that you would talk to me about, it shocked me. I didn't know Rey Mysterio was even addicted altogether. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? A lot of that surprised me. And I've heard about Taker being addicted at one point or another. And anytime you're about, been in the business as long as Taker has been and had this amount of operation on your body, addiction probably wouldn't shock you, but he just wasn't vocal about it.
Oh, yeah. Other wrestlers who have left addiction in the dust, guys like Sean Waltman, Sting, Mark Merrow, Rey Mysterio, Kurt Angle, Shawn Michaels, Dustin Rhodes, and whether they find their anchor through traditional substance abuse programs, DDP yoga, or religion, spiritualness.
Shout outs to Sean.
Or just wanting to, get back into the business and be a better person. They all found that strength to kick addiction and showed us that it's not some unbeatable demon,
Agree. And one thing about the redemption story is man, as we've seen, what makes addiction, I'm gonna tie this all together and end it before we go to break. But one thing about addiction is what's the word I'm looking for? You had mentioned something to me about the mortality rate. You know what I'm saying? A lot of guys are on borrowed time if you're a wrestler altogether. We're not even just talking about addiction. And so with this redemption story coming in and with DDP yoga, it just does nothing but helps extend the lifespan a little bit. Because what was that fact that you had talked about with
addiction and drug abuse have a really long connection, and we wrestling fans are the only ones to notice this stuff, so much so that Eastern Michigan University conducted a study in 2014 examining professional wrestlers who were active between the years of 1985 and 2011. They determined that the mortality rates for professional wrestlers were up to 2.9 times greater than the normal man in the U.S. In that same year, John Moriarty of the University of Manchester and a fellow colleague also found that the mortality rate for professional wrestlers was significantly higher than that of other athletes in other sports. Yes, sir.
Wow, man.
The experts suggested that the combination of the physicality of the business, no off season, the crazy high workload, some wrestlers doing between 100 and 200 matches per year, along with the drug culture, just contributed to an extremely high mortality rate that other athletes just didn't experience.
Yeah. And I don't know what WrestleMania was, but there's this one WrestleMania card where a good 80, 90% of the card are gone.
Yeah.
And this is the 80s we're talking about. This ain't like the 70s or 60s. Like these guys would be, 60 or 70 years old right as of now. And we're looking at Vince McMahon. He over having matches and taking bumps at 76 years old at WrestleMania. These guys should be here.
And we have a lot of guys that don't even make it to 50.
Yeah, which is crazy to me.
Yeah.
But on that note, guys, we're gonna go ahead and take a quick break and go ahead and reset everything. Make sure you stay tuned. We got a game coming up. Yo, mic check, 1 2 1 2. It's your boy right back here from our break on cultural influence. I got my brother Richie, and man, this is the addiction episode. We are just focusing on the topic of addiction. I think we're doing pretty good so far, but we had got on a good subject where we was talking about we had touched on it earlier about who is to blame. And I'm kind of one of those guys where it's kind of indifferent. You got to spread the blame out.
Yeah, for sure.
As much as I want to say we blame the wrestling promoters, but just as we had mentioned earlier with Tony Khan, Tony Khan is doing everything in his power to try and break that barrier. Now, recently with the Jeff Hardy situation, a lot of people might have their issues, but he's battling the mental health abuse and all that stuff. He's changing the backstage environment, which we can all agree after talking about it does play a role into the role of addiction.
Yeah.
And as much as we want to talk about WWE to some extent, WWE will pay for your rehab, even if you're not in the company.
Yeah, and it has to be said, they asked him to go.
Yeah.
They weren't just trying to cover their asses. They don't want another dead wrestler on their hands, you know what I'm saying? Because when something bad happens in wrestling, people don't think about wrestling. They think about WWE.
Yes, they do.
You know what I'm saying?
It is sad.
Yeah. So they had to find a way to better the culture of wrestling, not only for their own image, but also for the guys around them.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot can be said that they were asking him to take better care of himself, and he turned it down. And he was quick to get signed to the AEW. So major props on Tony Khan for seeing that and steering that car around.
Yeah. And as much as we want to sit there and say, Tony Khan saw his body breaking down, although I would still agree, I wouldn't have no Jeff Hardy competing and jumping off of ladders at 45 years old on TV. That's still my opinion.
Bro was jumping off ladders every damn week when he got in that company. Yeah. Glad he took the time to know, hey, I can't do this. I need to sit this out. Because if you don't take care of yourself, nobody else will. That's why another part of this is saying we can't just blame the bookers. A lot of that has to be accountability.
Exactly. And the easiest person to lie to as a person is yourself.
Yeah.
You can easily tell yourself, I don't need to go to rehab. I'm fine. I don't have no issues. And you could really believe that. And if you're a wrestler, you're living the fast life. So you don't really have time to just digest that, this is what's going on.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so, wrestlers definitely like that. And one story that I do want to talk about is Too Cold Scorpio. So let's go ahead and refer to why Too Cold Scorpio got released from the company.
HBK Rosie Ayers, why were you released in 1999 by WWF, and what was the aftermath of that?
The true story behind that is got hooked on that Jenny Craig diet. It was my fault, my problem. I got out there, got hooked on the shit. Happened to be out there in Phoenix, Arizona. Got so heavy on the shit, and I just got so fucking high. I just said fuck it. I was high as fuck and said fuck going to my hometown, Denver, Colorado, where I'm from, where my family's at, and I got everybody on the show trying to show up for it. Didn't show up because I'm too goddamn high and shit on goddamn crack to get on a goddamn airplane and leave. So I canceled out not one ticket, not two tickets, but 3 tickets. So many goddamn tickets and shit that they even called my goddamn house and called friends like, damn, is that motherfucker still there? What's going on? So now I'm telling Jim Ross that I got a motherfucking problem. No worries. We'll take care of it. But I need you to call me on this day, Tuesday, at 12 o'clock. So we can take care of this shit. I'll call him on Wednesday at 12 o'clock. Gotta let you go. I told you to call me on Tuesday, not call me on Wednesday. That's business. You're dealing with people with business too. They tell you to call on Tuesday at 12. You need to call on Tuesday at 12, not call on Wednesday at 12 when you come down from your high.
But the reason why I bring up Too Cold Scorpio is, man, Too Cold Scorpio was a guy that literally went over my radar as a kid. He was one of those people that, I didn't really pay attention to unless I wasn't on the internet hardcore. And the reason why it stuck out to me is because, man, I saw highlights of this dude doing 450 splashes, corkscrews, moonsaults, like all of that stuff in the 80s. In the 80s in WCW pretty much.
Yeah, ECW.
In ECW, and I'm like, yo, why is this dude? And he's,
yeah.
Why is this dude not getting talked about? Like, and the only reason, I didn't even know that was Flash Funk. Like,
yeah.
I had the WWE Encyclopedia.
Innovator, man.
The innovator of it all, and I'm just like, yo, what happened with this guy?
Yeah.
And then, with him just going on and admitting that, like, that's, goes into what you said, accountability.
Yeah.
And so I want to, also talk about like how guys can, accept the fact that like, it could have been a whole lot worse.
Yeah, yeah.
If guys would have just been honest with themselves.
Oh yeah, I think a lot of people like Shawn Michaels. He said, in fact, I don't know if Shawn Michaels has said it himself, but people have said it about Shawn Michaels. Whereas if Shawn Michaels would have left WWE in the mid '90s and went to WCW, he probably would have died.
Yeah, agree.
He was so far gone at that point, and he was so used to having the juice. And not the juice as in like the Jews, but the juice as just being the man and so pumped up and doing anything that he wanted to do. If he would have been in an even lesser, stricter environment, which would have been WCW, we might not have been able to have the Shawn Michaels that came back in 2002.
And gave us banger after banger, and I wouldn't, a person I can personally say I remember watching live as a kid. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, most definitely. And then you got Scott Hall there. A good chunk of the clique.
Oh yeah, all his homies was there. Like he would have wilded out. And we've seen what happens when guys get to go unrestricted in other places. TNA, for example.
Yeah. Jeff.
Kurt.
Yeah. Kurt.
We'll turn around and we'll tell you, I swear to God, Perk Angle is one of the best wrestlers. The best wrestler who probably ever walked this earth. But when that man was over there in TNA, he was doing things I had never seen him do. The dives off the balconies. He was attempting 450 splash. He was just a wrestling menace, bro. Like,
bro did a somersault off the stage and landed on his feet.
Yeah.
Like, the intensity was there.
He was a whole different beast, man. And it's just, you could tell that there were no gloves on him. There was nobody really guiding him and letting him do that. But he was literally at his worst.
Yeah, for sure.
And that was the reason he wasn't in WWE, because he had refused rehab and things like that. They were wanting him to get himself together because they knew he was going down the darkest road that there was.
Yeah.
And instead of taking care of himself, what did he do? He went somewhere where they would let him do whatever he wanted.
And that's crazy because Kurt even admits it, like, why he wanted to leave WWE, that he did refuse rehab, but he knew he didn't want to be in WWE because, once again, like, if he would have been in rehab and came back, because WWE, it's constantly going. And then that was around the time that he was there to relaunch the ECW. Like, the Kurt Angle podcast where he talks about leaving the WWE, it's pretty amazing. And those of you who haven't checked it out, highly advise you listen to it.
Yeah.
But, it does, like me as a kid, I'm thinking, I remember you're telling me, like, as much as, because I'm like 6, and you're telling me Kurt Angle left because he was tired and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, and so messed me up. I thought he was tired too.
And then weeks later, the dude's on 10. Like,
that blew my mind.
Yeah, so it's just like, come on, man.
Yeah, and we got the best Kurt Angle we've ever gotten, but it probably wasn't seen by as many people as it should have been seen by,
Exactly.
And if he would have just took a little bit of time to take care of himself, we probably could have gotten a better Kurt Angle.
Yeah.
No longer the chance for Jeff Hardy to make excuses about a lack of preparation time, and I'll be the first to admit that he's missed. To me, the world title win at this point.
Yeah, I mean, the victory road run is definitely the lowest of the low of his career. But we had seen Jeff kind of stumble around before we even got to that, And I also, a part of me can't help but think that, like, even the Antichrist of wrestling wasn't just a normal Jeff Hardy idea.
Yeah.
Man, I could totally be wrong, but I just feel like whenever I think of the Antichrist Jeff Hardy, I think of a Jeff Hardy that might be falling off the wagon.
True.
But that is some of the best work that Jeff Hardy has ever done, in my opinion.
I agree, because, Jeff, when you really think about it, Jeff doesn't have a character.
Yeah.
Like, Antichrist of Wrestling was a character. It was a gimmick. It was the whole nine.
Yeah. And I feel like it got cut a little short, and I guess we can blame addiction for that, right?
Yeah, you really can,
Sure.
man. Yeah. And, like, I think that Victory Road incident almost Do you
I feel like
do you think it destroyed wrestling? Because a lot of people said it did.
No.
Okay,
And also,
cool.
I don't want to make it sound like we're just pinpointing out Jeff Hardy, because Jeff Hardy is not the only person to have struggled with addiction. But Jeff Hardy has struggled with addiction on the biggest platform in the most recent history.
Yes.
We haven't seen anybody, come out looking the way Jeff Hardy did at that show. And it also, while I think it takes a great person like Jeff Hardy to be able to own up to that and not only come back, bounce back, and become better than ever and have another redemption run.
Good, yeah. I do notice that we was kind of going here.
Yeah. Jeff's one of my guys.
Yeah, we say it because we're passionate about Jeff Hardy.
Yeah. We want Jeff Hardy to be good.
Yeah, for real.
And so it was just hard seeing one of the people that you really looked up to growing up in that type of situation. And of all these other guys that we've seen, we haven't seen anybody really mess up the way Jeff Hardy messed up.
Agree. Yeah, for sure, man. And that also goes into the point of, like, with us as fans. And I think what we also can do as fans, and I'm pretty sure you talked about this earlier, but I think we also need to understand that these are humans.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? There are a lot of guys that surprise me with their addiction. You know what I'm saying? And as we go into the future, a lot of wrestlers that we're going to see on these platforms are going to have a tech thumb. Let's just be honest, you know what I'm saying? And, like, I think, thankfully, for the Jeff Hardys, for the Scott Halls, and for the Kurt Angles, these guys wasn't always on there. They didn't have time. Well, I mean, probably not, but, a lot of guys, as we've seen with Carmelo Hayes, a lot of guys are on Twitter, a lot of these guys that's in the future are going to see a lot of the things that us fans are going to be saying. Yeah. And so, like, I think us fans, we do got to understand that, like, what we do say without even knowing the full story, it can affect the person. Yeah. It can affect the families that we are just quick to pass judgment on.
Yeah, which is why, like, it's kind of hypocritical, I feel like, because we've probably said a lot of things we don't know the full story about as well. But I can acknowledge that and, and be remorseful if I ever was to offend any of these people, because I don't know the struggles they went through. I can only just speak on my perspective as a fan and be happy that these people found their way out of those dark paths,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because, I mean, and the thing is, it makes it worse for us because, like, social media and just media alone, it's fast. Yeah. And we're so quick to get something, and the whole goal is to, the sooner the better. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? And sometimes the sooner the better ain't always the best option because you don't know the full story.
Yeah, which is why I'm not quick to hop online and be like, oh, this happened and this needs to be happening and you should have done this or you should have done that. Who am I? Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
We still ain't heard from Naomi and Sasha.
We still haven't. We don't need to. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. It's nothing that serious. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like I know about me, but I just don't want to go out there and just be a clickbait guy.
Yeah. Go out and point blame at whoever for whoever. Everybody has their own reasons for doing anything that they do in this business.
Exactly, yeah. Like, why do you think Meltzer is as highly as respected as he is? Because, like, he gets the stuff and he knows what he's saying. Like, he just don't sit there and just say something for people to just raise an eye out, which he's very high respected in the wrestling reporter industry, should I say.
Speculation is dangerous, man, and it's just, you have to be careful with your platform and the things that you say about these people because, like we said, these are people, and you never know who might be listening to you, and you just want to be cognizant of that and be respectful of that.
Yeah, I just don't get it, man. Like, I think you mix that in with what is like I think there's no real clear definition of what is a cool wrestling fan. You know what I'm saying? Because, like, I feel like a lot of people want to be that ideal cool wrestling fan. Yeah. And I think with them just going out and just passing judgment on a guy for having addiction and liking AEW over WWE or New Japan over WWE or just being so quick to have an opinion and stuff like that, I think that makes them the ideal wrestling fan.
Yeah, there is no ideal wrestling fan. I think the ideal wrestling fan is somebody who just has fun and respects the other fans for enjoying it as well. Yeah. You can like one promotion over the other, but that doesn't make you a better fan than that other person.
Yeah. And it's funny because, like, when you hear about this division amongst wrestling fans, you would think we should be unified, but we're by far the most toxic. But, like, it literally takes a wrestler to tragically die or a wrestling event to be in your hometown for wrestling fans to kind of unite. Yeah. As sad as it may sound on the second part, but it's true though.
Yeah, because we are all fans and we can be divided online, but the sense of camaraderie that I feel at an indie show with other wrestling fans is very, very, like, there's nothing like it.
It isn't, man. It isn't.
Like, I've been at a show where I didn't know any of the guys in the ring, but I was there just having a good time cheering for the face and booing the heel, and there's other people over there, there's people over there, and you don't even know these people, but there's just a sense of camaraderie amongst us because at the end of the day, we're all wrestling fans, and at the end of the day, they are wrestlers and they are people, and we should just respect them as such.
Agree, man. I'm gonna let you have it on that note, man. But let's go ahead and do Family Feud, and we're just gonna do a quick fast money section. And this is kind of the first time, so we're just gonna go ahead and do a 30. I'm gonna give you 35 seconds. I'm gonna ask you all, as many questions as I can. Okay.
All right.
Which match is more likely to impact a wrestler's body?
Hell in a Cell.
Okay. Which superstar is probably the coolest person to smoke with?
Rob Van Dam.
Okay. Which current day wrestler could you see getting a Dark Side of the Ring episode in the next 10 years?
Current day wrestler?
Yes.
Vince McMahon.
Which body part is the most injury prone on a wrestler's body?
Ooh, I'm gonna go with back.
Back. All right. Awesome.
Name a wrestler most likely to jump off a ladder.
Chef Hardy.
Name a wrestler most likely to cheat during a match.
Eddie Guerrero.
Alright. You're in a no holds barred match. What is the first weapon that you grab?
Steel chair.
You have to pick a GM for your new show. Who are you picking?
You know what? I am going to pick Bret Hart.
Wow.
Yeah.
You are in a bar fight. You're going to pick one person to have your back. Who are you picking?
Bro, I am going to pick man, what is that dude's name? Oh my gosh. Farouk.
You barely beat it.
I said Farouk Ron Simmons, okay? Alright guys, we are out of time. Thank you guys for listening. This has been a blast. I hope we was able to inform you guys the right way about wrestling addiction. This was very fun. Richie, did you enjoy yourself, man?
Most definitely, man. It was kind of hard looking back at some of the dark sides of some of our favorite guys, but it's an avenue that needs to be explored from time.
Oh, for sure. And many more episodes like this are on the way. Make sure you follow me at Ray the Iconic Status on TikTok. And
follow your boy Richie Tulity, Rich Guy 405 on Instagram.
Oh, you already know. So, all right, man. Until next time. That's it.
Take care, y'all.